just like sacrifice, and God likes sacrifice to the point where it affects our lifestyle, which is what Abel was showing. He liked Abel's better than he liked Cain's, which made Cain jealous, and then Cain then proceeded to kill his brother Abel, which was the first murder. So because of this, and because so the author of Hebrews, by use of this example, what's he saying? He's saying, have faith, because it just might get you killed. That's a good message for a first sermon right there. That's great. That's why they give that to the guest speakers. So right now, some of you are probably thinking that, if you've been following along with Daryl, that, hold on, Daryl said that the book of Hebrews is a book of encouragement. And now Kevin's telling us that we're going to die. And to you, I would say this. It is a book of encouragement, and I'm getting to that part. The author's point in telling us all these stories about all these people, Abel, Enoch, Noah, Abraham, Moses, and all the rest that he says he can't get to because he doesn't have time. His point was not to give us this lovey-dovey idea that faith is something that will make the bad things go away. Or even that you'll see what you have faith in. What do all the stories of chapter 11 have in common? None of them saw the fulfillment of their faith. Read verse 39 again. And all of these, though commended through their faith, did not receive what was promised. They all got their little fulfillments, but they were looking forward to something better. They were looking forward to a better result. The immediate stuff was taken care of. Minor wars, skirmishes, getting through the flood, Moses leading the Israelites through the desert for 40 years, the Red Sea. You've all seen the Charlton Heston thing. That's minor. That's secondary. They all had faith that God would restore what was lost in the Garden of Eden. They all had faith that God would repair the link that was broken when Adam sinned. Eventually, they came to call this faith in the Messiah, faith that the Messiah would come and fix it. We know that now to be Jesus. But that's why they did what they did. And that's why they're mentioned in the book of Hebrews. Because they all felt assured that God was working to fix what was broken in Eden. They were all convinced that he would send his Messiah. I'm going to share two stories this morning that happened pretty recently in my life. Both of them are examples of faith. One of them is a good example, one of them is a bad example. The first one's a story from my home church in St. Catharines. It's a place called Harvard. It was the beginning of a series called Everything Happens for a Reason, but... ... We have a lot in common with the city. It's good. Jeff, our pastor, opened up his sermon by asking if anyone in the audience had 20 bucks on them. This is before the offering. Who's got 20 bucks? 50's better, 100's great. That's what he said. And up from the audience stands up this guy. So Harvard's only a bit bigger than River City, so most of us knew who Mark was. And Mark stands up, and he walks to the front of the audience, and not only does he give Jeff, his wallet, or his 20 bucks, he hands him his wallet. Just takes out his pocket, gives it to him. Credit cards, everything. I'm pretty sure he knew Jeff wasn't going to book a cruise with his card, but he gave him his wallet. Mark's not an old guy, he's probably about Daryl's age. And he didn't know what Jeff was going to do with the money. He could have said, thanks, I'm going to go for lunch with my family. It's on you, thanks. Long story short, he gave the money back. But that's not the end of the story. That was the last week any one of us saw Mark in church. That week he had a massive heart attack and spent some time in the hospital with a coma. And his last act within his church family was to give all that he had with him as an act of worship, because that's what he thought God wanted him to do. Funny thing was, the very next week, and this has been planned for months, the very next week was a guest speaker speaking about suffering and grief. And they say God doesn't have a sense of humor. Gets better. On his deathbed, his wife and his kid were singing songs of praise with him. That's faith in something better. That's conviction. That's assurance. Mark knew where he was going. Chapter 12, verse 1 again. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. We've got some great examples of faith in history. There's lots in Hebrews, chapter 11 specifically. There's story after story in Acts. For some more modern stuff, if you're into the modern faith stories, DC Talk came up with a book a few years ago called Jesus Freaks. And I can't speak to the validity of them all of the stories. They're certainly not gospel truth, but fantastic stories. There's some great, great stories of faith. Just as the Old Testament believers had faith that God was going to send the Messiah to reconcile sin, New Testament believers have faith in the return of that Messiah, that he's going to come back. In a lot of ways, faith should be easier for us than it was for them. We have this book that is full of promises that God made and kept. There's only one left. If Abel and Enoch and Noah and Abraham and Moses and the rest of them, if they could all do it, the author of Hebrews tells his audience, you can too. You gotta remember, Hebrews was written to first century ethnic Jews who were undergoing persecution and beatings and wanted to go back to the relative safety of Judaism. Because Christians were being killed for their faith. And Hebrews wanted to be saved. Who wouldn't? On a different level, this carries through to today. A lot of people come to believe in Jesus and think, okay, I'm a Christian now, everything's going to be great. Set. It's great. My life's going to get better. I'm going to have a nicer house, bigger car. It's going to be fantastic. And that's not what Jesus does. It happens occasionally. But more often than not, after you become a Christian, your life gets harder, not easier. But the author of Hebrews is telling them, just as our ancestors suffered and made it through, so can we. There's something else going on in chapter 12 that puts some weight to this idea that faith isn't a fluffy thing. Verse 6 talks about, for the Lord disciplines the one he loves and chastises every son whom he receives. Sometimes this can be hard and painful. Sometimes it's really funny. I'll share a second story that I really sometimes don't want to because it's about me. I told you I was going to share one good one and one bad one. Well, I'm the bad one. Some of you know that this summer I was a camp counselor at Camp Shalom, which is a camp just outside of town. And I was what you would call a trek counselor. What our job was, we would take the kids out on a Tuesday and come back on Friday. And the whole week was spent canoeing, camping, and portage. It was a really hard job. Anyways, one of these mornings, as it was this day of the week, it was my job to wake up early and make breakfast for everyone. And just like every other week, it was raining. If you've never had French toast on a camp stove, it's amazing. If you've ever had French toast on a camp stove when it's raining, it's soggy. So it's raining. So I don't want to get up. I'm in my tent, I can hear the rain falling, and basically I pray, please Jesus, make the rain stop so that we can have an unsoggy breakfast and get the kids in the river and they can have a good week. But nothing wrong with praying that. The problem is that as soon as I finished praying that the Lord of the universe would stop the rain, I put on a raincoat. Because I can still hear the raindrops on my tent and I can still kind of see clouds. And that's not to say that every time you pray, God will stop the rain. But in this case, I had absolutely no faith in God. So as soon as I get out of the tent, and as soon as I finish zipping my flap clothes, I turn around, blue sky, no rain, nothing. I wish I was making this up. And I'm there in my 3/4 length raincoat. Thankfully no one else was up, because I would have been really embarrassed. my father disciplined me, like a good father should. Sometimes I think of that story and I can just imagine the look on Jesus' face